let's move on. I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this. So we also watched the new Richard Linklater movie, Hitman. You saw it in theaters, I believe, right?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, I saw it on Netflix. It wasn't playing anywhere around me, so I just caught it on Netflix the other night. Uh, this is basically, I would say, at least to me, I would say this seems like more of a vehicle for Glenn Powell, and his kind of rise to fame that we're seeing this year. Uh, but anyway, just just give me your first impressions of what did you think about Hitman, and do you have like strong feelings on Linklater? Are you a big Linklater guy?
I've liked all of his movies that I've seen so far. I haven't seen all of them, but I've
Hmm.
seen. I love Boyhood. I liked Apollo 10 and a half, Space Age Childhood that came out a year or two ago. I also uh, I grew up with Schoolhouse of Rock,
Hmm.
School of Rock. Yeah, I think that's what it's called. Yeah, and so so yeah, the ones I've seen I've liked. He's definitely a filmmaker that has always interested me. I one of these days I really should sit down and watch the Before trilogy. That's the thing that people always
Yep.
talk to him because I love Ethan Hawke. So there's that. But yeah, no, I when I heard about the movie because I think it came out of TIFF, I want to say.
Hmm.
Uh, I was interestedly, instantly interested, wanting to check this out because I have enjoyed Glenn Powell's Rise, and I really do like Linklater. So yes, I did go and see it in a surprisingly packed movie theater at Regal Union Square, and I liked it quite a bit.
Okay. Uh, yeah, I was trying to think. This was one of those weird movies that, yeah, I think it premiered like last year or something, early last year at a film festival because it was on my watch list. It was on my radar for a while. And then I was like, is this movie it was one of those annoying festival things where I was like, is this movie coming out this year or is it coming out next year? When does it hit theaters or is it, waiting for distribution, whatever. Uh and I knew it was like the new Richard Linklater movie. And I was looking at Richard Linklater on Letterboxd, and yeah, I'm not super familiar with his movies. I've seen Dazed and Confused. I like Dazed and Confused. I think it's fine. I know people love it. I haven't seen Boyhood.
Oh, you
Um,
got it.
I know I have to see it, and I know the whole story about how it was shot. School of Rock, I remember from when I was a kid. And yeah, the Before trilogy. I know there's like a whole thing behind that I haven't seen, but other than that, yeah, it seems like his filmography is like a little all over the place with what he's kind of known for, and I don't know,
He's a
but
very chill indie filmmaker out of Texas who just kind of does whatever interests him. I think he has his own movie theater actually. I don't remember what part of Texas it's in, but it's very famous if you're in like the indie film scene in that part of Texas that you can go to, and he curates stuff. So he's like a huge cinephile. Very
okay,
cool.
yeah, no, it just yeah. So I was never really like, I knew the name and I know some of the movies. I just never was like big on him or had like a really
Yeah.
grasp on who he was as a filmmaker. So yeah, but apparently he's very respected, and yeah, or respected, and I definitely got to check out more of his stuff. But yeah, so we get this new Hitman movie. Uh, is a yeah, like a vehicle for Glenn Powell, who's now having this moment. Later this year, he has Twisters coming out, which I'm really excited for. Kind of this weird narrative about, he's got the movie star face. He's like the one of the most handsome guys in the world, but he's also a little bit older than your traditional movie star, like young up and coming. He's like 35 years old. So I know like that's kind of part of his narrative that he's kind of a little bit older in life to now getting all this stardom. But yeah, it's weird to me how this stuff happens because he was in Top Gun Maverick as one of the antagonists, I believe. Yeah, it's just been interesting to me seeing like Glenn Powell just all of a sudden just pop out of nowhere. seemingly, because he's been in a couple other things. But anyway, uh, so I think this is a great career move for him, doing a movie like this where he's trying to be like, okay, I'm more than just a pretty actor. He's doing the thing where I want to be taken seriously as an actor, and I think he's really good in it. And I like him as an actor. I'm excited for the new Twisters movie coming out in a couple of weeks. I did not like this movie at all.
No.
Yeah, I took a lot of notes because I was like, oh, I have to, because I know a lot of people are loving this movie. This was not for me at all. So yeah, what did you like about it? Tell me your like some of your thoughts on what you thought it was good about it.
It's a great character piece, in my opinion. He's really given the opportunity to shine. The character goes in some interesting directions as far as he starts off as a more reserved, cloistered person, is then able to almost through like perverse machinations, like assume all of these identities and slip out of himself through this role as the hitman.
Mhm.
And I like that it has like almost this aesthetic. It really reminded me of. Have you ever watched from the '80s like any of the old like Stephen J. Cannell shows, like all those like private detective shows that were really popular in like
No.
the '80s and early '90s? Yeah, it really reminded me of those. Of like some really it would be a deconstruction of those, but it was playing with those aesthetics of like some gritty motherfucker who's like on the outer fringes of law enforcement, and like has usually like a witty voiceover narration and is like getting into all kinds of like hijinks because of the nature of his life. Like it kind of reminds me of that, but it's almost like a deconstruction of that because he's like this nerdy guy who's doing it for fake and doing it on the payroll of the police. Like he's fully within the system in this sense. So I like the way that it played with a lot of those tropes and asked us a lot of questions about identity and concept of self. And
Mhm.
played with. I saw this great interview with Linklater where he talked about how he was like playing with like 40s film noir
Mhm.
and screwball comedy, and I enjoy all of those dynamics. Definitely, I felt the ending was a little unsettling for me personally, but I also think that is part of the point of what Linklater is getting at with this. So yes.
Okay. And just full disclosure, we're probably going to get into spoilers. So we won't have to like try to dance around anything.
Okay.
But yeah, so I just had a kind of visceral rejection of this movie for a couple of reasons. But at the end of the day, I think this is a great choice for Glenn Powell as an actor. I thought he was really good in it. Yet, like you said,
Well wrote it.
he gets a lot of opportunities to play all these different characters. I thought that was a lot of fun. But I felt like this movie, and for some people, they actually enjoy this aspect of it because I've listened to some reactions to it. And again, a lot of people seem to like it. But it seems like I feel like I'm going to start to get one movie, and then it just goes into all of these different kind of things that I didn't think it was going to go into, and there was other stuff other ideas that they bring up that I think they don't commit to, and just it ends up being about something that I didn't really want to see, which is, it's not just that it's not what I wanted, it's just I wasn't into what I was getting. It's because it is kind of like a comedy noir-ish, almost rom-com-y in a way. It's mixing in a lot of different stuff, right?
Sure.
But okay, so here's I'm gonna read you my Letterbox review,
Okay.
and we can, because I did take notes, but because there's so much stuff I just didn't like about it. Okay, here's what I wrote. It presents a lot of scenes poking at interesting ideas, but never commits to any of them. There are at least 5 short films in this script that could explore the ideas introduced better in isolation. It boils down to an adaptation of an erotic fiction novel made to be consumed by wine moms in their 30s on a Kindle who are addicted to true crime and a little too into the Jeffrey Dahmer series. It's masquerading as a film about identity and human motivations by quoting Nietzsche philosophy, but devolves into a sex fantasy, which I think a movie like The Mask does way better. I said, it's Netflix trash trying to sell you on the idea that it's something more than it's about. So that's just what I wrote first. I just think all of the themes about identity and, can you change yourself and become someone different? I think that all just runs really kind of hollow for a couple of reasons. Number one, I get really distracted by how because Glenn Powell is Glenn Powell. I get hung up on the looks thing. Right? Does that make sense?
Sure.
Like, they make him nerdy in the way that, okay, they put glasses on him, they give him the long hair, he's wearing like these very nerdy professor clothes. And then at some point in the beginning opening scene, the other cop guy looks at him right in the jawline and says, "You have a forgettable face." Like, it just, his whole transformation into becoming Ron, this hitman with more confidence, I get hung up on that stuff where it's like, no, you're a model, dude. Like, all you had to do was put on like a good fitting shirt and like a necklace, and just not wear your glasses, and you have movie star looks. I get hung up on that. Like, I feel like that. Again, if I'm Glenn Powell, I'm taking this role because it's so good, but I don't feel like he was right for the story. Just he has movie, like I feel like Paul Dano would have been a great choice to play this role.
Sure. You do know that Glenn Powell co-wrote this, right?
Yes, I do know that.
Yes. He and Richard Linklater they are actually frequent collaborators. Glenn Powell, one of the roles he got started, he was in a couple of Linklater's early movies as like a kid. And so they just always stayed in touch and had a mutual interest in the news story that this movie is based on.
Yep.
And they were just like, let's write a movie together. So I think that I wouldn't say this is just a cynical like star vehicle for Powell. I do think this comes from a genuine place of like friendship and interest in the story between him and Linklater. I do think, if I recall from an interview, they did initially think to cast someone else, but then because Powell put so much of himself into it, he was like, okay, I'll do it. And actually, Powell had a lot of control over the costume choices. Like they would storyboard it out, and they would have concept art of what they wanted each identity to look like. But the final touches were all him. So he would show up to set, and later would be like, "What?" Like, and so, to me, I didn't have it. I bought the transformation. I think he starts off. They do a really good job with the hairstyling and makeup to kind of make him look very pale, make him look very uncomfortable and uncomely. And I think that seeing him slip into almost like another skin through the outfit changes, and seeing him really question, like, okay, what are the choices that I would make to give this person what they want to see, what they think they're getting. In a lot of ways, this is like a deconstruction of acting, right? These are the same calculations you make as an actor, as far as like what you think the director's looking for, what do you think the audience's expectations are, what do you think makes sense for the character as you do your research and your reading, and in this way, it worked for me. That's what I'll say. It worked for me. I do think there is some truth when you were like, it devolves into a 90s erotic thriller. And I was like, yeah, but that's why it's good to me personally. That's what's great about it. So, yeah.
See, yeah, and that's your mileage may vary on that stuff. See, I just felt it becoming like there were so many good, like, oh, this would be a really interesting scene to explore. Yeah, I guess I'll start with the scene when he first meets Madison, right, in the diner with the pie. Um, I thought that was a really interesting setup where he sees this woman and clearly she's like this trad wife who is being abused by her husband, and he has this moral. Yeah, no, like the scene when he first meets Madison, I thought it was a really interesting setup and what they're going to go into with her as a character and exploring her relationship with this abusive husband. I just I didn't buy that, like, almost in a snap instant she just starts flirting with Glenn Powell and is just immediately so comfortable with him when he's supposed to be this hitman. And I can understand the motivation of, she's desperate to connect with someone on a personal level. That makes sense. But I felt her character throughout the movie almost, this is going to sound mean, I felt like she just was very unsympathetic. And I'm like, you get what's coming to you. Like, now you are. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think the movie is saying she's a freak, though. So in a sense, maybe she is a little unsympathetic, like
I didn't like
they're
her.
very upfront where even he's kind of like, so you're cool with this, right? You think it's cool that I kill people. And that's kind of part of what he's wrestling with, because in his heart, at least he thinks in his heart, he's just the nerdy college professor trying to do the right thing. But he's also slipping into becoming the person that she wants, which is kind of like her guardian angel, being this white knight for her, because she doesn't like her situation. She wants someone dangerous who can fend off foes for her, even if that means putting that person in like insane situations that she instigates. And in a way, it's also part of her arc of like self-actualization, since it ends with her killing her husband anyway. So
Right.
yeah, I mean, yeah, I do think the movie is saying she's a freak. I don't think it's necessarily saying she's a damsel in distress. It just that she requires, in much the way that he requires a push and being pushed into the hitman role, she requires a push in insofar as like developing this partnership with him, I guess you could say.
Right. It's I get that. It just felt like to me, and this kind of just maybe just speaks more to me. Like I just felt like I didn't like this person. Like she was. It almost felt like she wasn't really thinking about her situation and reckoning with her situation in any way. All she was doing was just reacting to Glenn Powell and just not thinking of like, okay, like what are you gonna do? Like you're just gonna start dating this hitman? Like, can you trust him? How do you know he's not going to kill you at some point for some reason that you're gonna get mixed up in something? It like and the whole, I thought they were gonna like go in a little bit more to her relationship, and because I think of an abusive husband or someone that is obsessed and very controlling, she leaves, like she's gonna start leaving he's gonna start like leaving messages on her phone, calling her constantly, showing up, like trying to find out where she lives. And like they do have one interaction where they run into him, but like I thought he was going to be like a stalker type thing, like just having control over her, and they didn't really go into any of that. It just became like I just kept seeing Madison as a girl who just is someone that like just I saw her as like a character that is a product of this like true crime phase of like there's a lot of like girls that read like these very erotic like think of like Twilight or 50 Shades of Grey, and they're looking for, they want danger, they're attracted to that, but it's kind of just like, but in this situation this is what is going to get you killed, and maybe possibly how you ended up. Like, there's no reflection on her end. It just evolved into like, to me, it just became the erotic story that people just want to see. It's just that like just this kinky sex stuff between these two very hot people, and I just
mean,
Yeah.
I don't think I agree though, because she does take actions on her own. She kills her husband, which is not something Glenn Powell wanted her to do. She bought a gun, which is not something that he wanted her to do.
I thought
It's she has her own arc of self actualization, and is pushed through that, because part of the story here is it's this is another trope in these kinds of detective stories and these kinds of screwball comedies, and even in the more modern prestige television sense, which is like our main character thinks he has it under control, but really he's starting to get more and more in over his head. And so her being a little crazy and to keep upping the ante a little bit is part of him not really having a handle on this house of cards. And what this movie
hmm
does that's different about that is that it's also coupling it with themes of identity, which is like what does he do to try to reassert control? He goes deeper into the character. It doesn't pull out, he goes deeper. And so that's how he starts to let go of the old self, and how we start asking these questions about change. And she's kind of dragging him along.
hmm
So I do think it serves a purpose, and I don't. I think you're being a little reductive about her character.
Maybe. Maybe. Yeah, I think it's just more just maybe just yeah, my personal experience and just how I see I've like known people like this, I feel like. To your point, like when she like gets the gun, I didn't even see that as, oh, she's taking action. She's, I mean, yes, you're right. She did take action to kill her husband and take matters into her own hands. But like when she like has the gun, I didn't see that as like, oh, I'm here to protect myself. It's like, no, I want you to like fuck me with this gun to my head. Like it was like a kink. Like she was presenting it as like a kinky thing, you know? And I just found that so uninteresting. And I think this story would have been so much more interesting to me is that I found that just Glenn Powell making this transformation from Gary to Ron is the killer's name, is so physically I feel it's very easy for him because he's just already has movie star looks. Like I just think this would have been so much more interesting if just on a visual level if this character would I do get hung up about this stuff in movies, like especially when this is a movie where this guy has to gain his confidence, he has to find himself, he has to play this character, and I get that, but just when I'm looking at it, when I'm watching the movie, I'm just seeing this is a gorgeous person, like his jawline can cut glass. I get hung up about stuff like that in movies, like when it comes to looks, because I just think it's so unrealistic. Like if this person did not look like a movie star, I feel like he would have more to overcome physically to make that transformation into Ron. And so I just was, as much as like I like Glenn Powell and I think he's great, I just think it's like it's the curse of the great genes. Like just this is it's something I get hung up on. I'm like, man, if this was like a schlubby dude or just someone that didn't look like Glenn Powell, I would find it so much more interesting because I would think he would have so much more to overcome as a character. Does that make sense? Like I get a lot of people this wouldn't bother them, but
Um, it personally did not bother me. I think I was comfortable with the transformation. I think it worked for me. However, you may have a point.
yeah, I mean,
Um,
it's some people it doesn't bother, which is fine. It is something. It is a weird thing I have with movies sometimes, especially when it comes to looks. When so many actors like they're models, and
yeah.
I just get hung up on that stuff. Like it would be like if someone else played it anyway. So yeah, there was that. Then we have like the courtroom scenes when Glenn Powell has to give like testimonies about the people he's convicting. Like again, I thought that was actually a really interesting, like very interesting ideas being presented. But I didn't feel like the idea of like the ethics of are you just luring someone in
Mm.
to a murder and trapping them, or like I thought that was a very interesting thing to explore. I don't know. Maybe I just found the philosophical conversation around that kind of boring because I just had a very strong stance on it. Like, yeah, I completely agree with Glenn Powell. He's not. They have full intent to murder. Like, okay, give me your reaction about those scenes. I don't know.
So here's where I may agree with you a little more. So I agree that I think that this movie's relation how this movie conceives its relationship to law enforcement is a little dodgy. I think I initially it's kind of like, oh, okay, so he's going on this journey of self-actualization, and that's how he realizes that, the scumbag cop who is his villain, that's your stand-up to realize that, oh, he's one of the good ones.
Right.
Or are they saying that like, but then it's also portraying the police as like, they're all kind of goofy, they're all a little incompetent. Like, what is it trying to say? And there are those moments in the courtroom, but then I think you get to the end and it's kind of like, oh, maybe he's not one of the good ones, and maybe the cops are right all along about him. And so I think that it doesn't fully, it's more interested in these conversations of self and like these kind of like Freudian ideas of identity than I think fully examining whether or not law enforcement is good or bad, whether or not what he is doing to these people is good as bad. I think by emphasizing that they have full intent, it's more of a mea culpa. I guess you could say that, oh, you know, he's not doing evil, he's doing good. Just focus on the fact, yes, he will do questionable things later, but like
Right.
focus on the identity conversation, not the ethics conversation. That's how I would um take it personally.
Right. Yeah, and that actually it again, like, I thought this movie was presenting very interesting things that could have been explored. Where, like, again, like, I was like thinking like, oh man, like, this would be a great short film. When
Yeah.
he goes later into the movie, he goes into the diner and meets the guy with the camo hat.
Hmm.
When he's like back to back with him, and just like, I was thinking like, man, this would be a great premise for a short film. Just a meeting between a guy and a hitman in a diner, and they have a conversation and they talk about like what they're gonna do and what the plan is. And so like in that situation, he mentions to the guy, his name is Mike, I wrote down. Glenn Powell, basically, he asks them if they're married or something, and he says, what is that? Or if they're divorced yet, and he says, what does that matter? And he says, okay, well, you know what, I'll throw in the boyfriend for free if they're together. And then the guy gets up and goes, you know what, no, I'll do it myself, and walks out. And I was like, that's an interesting, like, I was like, what would you do in that situation? Like, if someone goes, no, I'm going to, as a cop, if you're undercover and someone says, no, I'm going to do it myself, and walks out, could you get them on that? Like, this guy is going to kill his wife and potentially her boyfriend, and they don't go back to that at all. Like, I thought that was going to be an interesting thing, but it really just goes into more about Glenn and his, I don't know, I was like, oh, what would they do in that situation? Then I was like, wait, this guy's going to go out and kill his wife, and like, they're just like, okay, moving on. What was your reaction to that scene? I don't know.
Which is this when is this the scene where the client turns out to be the husband? Is that what you're referring to?
No. No, they're in the diner, and Glenn Powell, like, they're sitting back to back,
Yeah.
and the guy is crying, kind of. And he's wearing a camouflage hat. It's later in the movie.
Okay.
It was not a very long scene. I don't know.
I saw this movie a couple weeks ago. I don't
Okay.
know if I remember that particular
Yeah.
scene. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. It was a short scene. I was like, oh man, that is interesting. Like, if someone just admits he doesn't give him the money and he goes, I'm going to go kill my wife myself, and just walks out, like, oh shit, could they go after that guy? Like, I don't know. It felt like, again, I thought it was such an interesting idea, but it didn't go anywhere to me. I'm trying to think of what other notes do I have. trying to think. Yeah, and then there was the scene kind of at the end where he's sitting with he's teaching his class outside, right?
Yeah.
And they're having this conversation about the death penalty, basically. And
Yes.
what do you do in a situation where you have someone that is clearly going to be like like a very evil force, and like, would you vote to kill him or keep him imprisoned? And I don't know, I felt like that scene is where I just didn't think this movie. I think this movie thinks it's actually smarter and more interesting than it is, because I didn't find anything really in that scene discussed interesting. And what it just comes down to is Glenn Powell is basically in that scene agreeing with the idea of, yes, maybe we should kill the evil guy. And then the classmate just goes, when did I realize our professor is hot? Because they just get turned on by the fact that this guy's bloodthirsty. And I'm like, well, that's not really a philosophical discussion. Like, fuck you. Like, I don't know. I don't know if you remember that scene, but I just, that was...
I do remember that scene. What that scene is doing is it's setting up Glenn Powell giving himself permission to kill the guy at the end. And so yeah, so what you're seeing with that scene, I think that scene is not necessarily the philosophical content. It's about the character over time buying into his own. He's becoming consumed by the other identities, which is like, killing is good. Where he goes from
Right.
not wanting to kill people to killing can be good sometimes. And yeah, the when did he become hot is just part of like the overall themes of like eroticism, I guess you could
Sure.
say.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. There was one other thing. Yeah, like I don't know. Well, let's just talk about the ending. Because you said you had some weird qualms with the ending, and I know a lot of people have as well. What was your issue with the ending? I don't really.
So for me, I read this as a story about what's supposed to be a basically good man. When I was watching the movie initially, I was encountering it as it's basically a good man trying to make the best of a very messy situation. And this girl just keeps like constantly upping the ante and making it hard to keep things all together. And then you have this scumbag cop approaching him from the other end, looking into his shit. So by ending it with him killing said cop, I was like, oh, that's a bit much for me. We're kind of saying this is good because that it's part of this weird Bonnie and Clyde thing going on. So that felt a little weird. Now, as I've read more about the movie and as I've watched more interviews about the movie, I'm more okay with the ending than I was when I like left the theater, day of. But yeah, that's what it was for me. I wasn't sure if I was like, is this like an endorsement of murder? Like I don't know. That felt, when I watched it, that my live raw reaction, that's like what made me uncomfortable. Day of.
Right. Yeah, at that point I was so like, yeah, this isn't what I wanted this movie to be. I was kind of not checked out. I was just kind of already done. I mean, I guess it does introduce like some morally gray aspects to it, I guess. But yeah, at that point I don't know, man. I wasn't on the movie's side at all. Can I just give some weird nitpicks where I'm just gonna sound like an asshole of stuff that I just
Go for it.
so I didn't okay. Wasn't really like I don't think Richard Linklater's directing is anything special. I was getting like, because I wasn't really invested in a lot of what was going on, I started to pay attention to stuff where I was getting real nitpicky about. for example, in the beginning when Madison and him like go on that first date to like a dog adoption thing,
Mhm.
like a rescue place, I'm like, okay, that's an interesting idea. And then like he picks up like the most adorable little puppy, and I'm like, that is not how the ASPC works. If you were at like a real like a real ASPCA, you would be picking up like the oldest, mangiest dogs, but they give you like the most photogenic, picture perfect puppies to adopt. And then and then then I was like looking at like set design stuff when they were in Madison's house. I'm like, how did this chick get all of this money? Like, does she have like all this money? She's living on this, like, does she work? She has like this very like HGTV looking house. Like, I just wasn't.
Yeah.
And this is so nitpicky. I wouldn't care about this if I was actually like enjoying the substance, but I was just like, this set design sucks. Like, this looks like.
Yeah. Now that you mention it with the house, so at first I was okay with it because I thought, oh, her husband's probably just very wealthy and she just like siphoned off whatever cash she could. Which I think
Somehow.
they do say in the movie that she was able to like get a hold of some money and that killing him was probably part of some like life insurance plot.
But that was after
Um,
she got the house.
Yes, yes. But then we like meet the guy and he doesn't look very wealthy. He kind of just looks like a very normal guy, you know?
Yeah. I'm sure.
So,
I guess it's safe to assume he had money.
yeah. Yeah, because again, part of her motivation is the life insurance plot. So there was some money somewhere, but he doesn't. He what my point is that he gives off very regular guy energy, not I'm a rich man and I don't have time for my wife and I'm also very mean to her energy.
Right.
Like you know. So I can see that.
Yeah. Uh. Yeah. And last thing I'll say. Yeah. I just got so like hung up on how much I didn't think Madison was a sympathetic character at all when she comes in to that diner and sits down and has like these big puppy dog wide eyes, and immediately I'm like, "Oh, you're just a like yes, you're in this very abusive relationship, but you're just setting yourself up to get into the same type of situation, if not worse. And maybe I'm not supposed to like her, maybe that's part of it, but I just and maybe that's not what the movie was trying to do. Was very clearly it wasn't trying to really examine her too much. I just loathed it. But anyway, yeah. Again, I don't like. I just had a rejection of it on a lot of levels. But I do like Glenn Powell. I think it was definitely the right career move for him. That's how I viewed it. I was like, and I didn't see it as like a cynical like thing. I do think, yeah, I know he wrote it with Linklater, and definitely there was like passion behind it. But just on those story elements of what they were trying to tell, just didn't work for me overall. But I'm glad you liked it. Is it like on the higher end of things of what you've seen this year, you think?
Yes, so far. Though I don't know if I count it as a 2024 movie,
Hmm.
but yeah, definitely of the things I've seen this year so far, it is up there for me. There are plenty of more things to come this year that could easily knock it down. Again, I'm not sure if I count it as a 2024 movie, so maybe it doesn't even factor in and like rankings and such. But yeah, it is higher for me.
Okay.
Not in my four, as you saw.
Yeah.
But
Okay. Cool. Yeah. I mean, I consider it 2024. I know it's so annoying right now with like what is a 2024 and what is a 2023. I don't know, but yeah, I mean, glad people liked it, but not my thing, but I'm excited to see what Glenn Powell goes on to do. I'm excited for Twisters. That's what I'll say. That might be disappointing, but I'm excited for that.